To the sentencing of El Chapo's heir, his prosecutor gave a chilling prediction. He was facing death. Days later, he was found dead. But what really happened to Ovidio Guzman behind those prison walls? It is time to uncover the cover-ups, betrayals, and secret deals that led to his shocking end. And why the real story is far more terrifying than it appears. The Mouse's rise and fall. In the dark underworld of Mexican drug cartels, few names carry as much weight as Guzman. While the world knows Joaquin El Chapo Guzman as one of history's most notorious drug lords, his son Ovidio Guzman Lopez built his own dark legacy in the world of organized crime. Known by the chilling name El Raton, the Mouse, Ovidio's story is one of inherited power, violent resistance, and ultimately a dramatic fall from grace that shook the very foundations of the Sinaloa cartel.
Has a plea deal brokered by attorney Lickman and is scheduled to plead guilty on July.
Born on March 29, 1990, in the heart of Mexico's drug trafficking epicenter, Culiacan, Sinaloa, Ovidio Guzman Lopez was destined for a life far removed from ordinary existence. As the son of El Chapo and Griselda Lopez Perez, he was born into what many considered criminal royalty. A world where violence and vast wealth walked hand in hand, where loyalty was measured in blood, and where betrayal often meant death. The Guzman name itself carried a weight that could open doors, silence enemies, and command respect throughout Mexico's criminal underworld. Yet with this privilege came an expectation that he would not simply ride on his father's coattails, but prove himself worthy of the empire he was set to inherit. From his earliest years, Ovidio was immersed in the culture and operations of the Sinaloa cartel. Unlike many children who grew up dreaming of becoming doctors, teachers, or astronauts, Ovidio's childhood was shaped by the brutal realities of drug trafficking, money laundering, and territorial warfare.
He's a poster child for this. I mean, he's engaged in violence.
He was raised in Mexico City and briefly educated at a school run by the Legionaries of Christ. But his true education came from the streets and the cartel's operations. This formal education, however short, gave him a veneer of respectability that would later prove useful in his criminal endeavors, teaching him how to navigate both the legitimate and illegitimate worlds with equal skill. The transformation of young Ovidio from a cartel prince to an active leader began in earnest around 2008, when he started his involvement in drug trafficking operations. This was not a sudden leap into crime, but a gradual rise that had been building throughout his teenage years. By 2012, he had already gained recognition from the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, which named him a key lieutenant in the Sinaloa cartel's hierarchy. This was not merely ceremonial recognition. It was acknowledgement of his growing influence and control within one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations. Together with his brothers Joaquin, Ivan Archivaldo, and Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio became part of what the underworld came to know as Los Chapitos, the Little Chapos. This faction proved instrumental in the cartel's evolution, particularly in its devastating expansion into fentanyl trafficking. The Los Chapitos faction has been linked to massive drug operations, especially fentanyl, which has caused numerous overdose deaths in the U.S. The brothers brought a new level of sophistication and ruthlessness to the cartel's activities, blending their father's strategic vision with a younger generation's grasp of technology and global markets. The rise of Los Chapitos as a dominant force within the Sinaloa cartel marked a generational shift in how the organization operated. While El Chapo's era had built the cartel through personal ties and territorial control, his sons adopted a business-like model that valued efficiency, diversification, and technological innovation. They understood that the future of trafficking lay not only in controlling territory, but in mastering supply chains, financial networks, and information flows. But Ovidio's criminal career would be marked by more than drug trafficking. In 2018, he was indicted alongside his brother Joaquin for conspiracy to traffic cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana. With the indictment unsealed in 2019,
His son was whisked from Mexico to Chicago in a mysterious and yet unexplained private plane flight across.
This legal action set the stage for a series of dramatic confrontations between Mexican authorities and the cartel, drawing international attention. The Culiacanazo became a watershed moment that revealed the true extent of cartel power in modern Mexico. What unfolded on that October day was not just a failed arrest. It was a clear demonstration of how a criminal organization had reached near parity with the state itself. Cartel gunmen threatened mass civilian casualties to prevent bloodshed, forcing President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to order Ovidio's release just hours after his capture. The decision to free Ovidio sent shockwaves through international law enforcement circles. and raised troubling questions about the real balance of power in Mexico.
Tremendous embarrassment to the Mexican government and also to the business community.
For Ovidio, the failed arrest was both a victory and a warning that would shadow his every move for the next 3.5 years. While he had escaped capture through the cartel's show of force, he had also placed an enormous target on his back. During this period, Ovidio continued to play a crucial role in the Sinaloa cartel's operations. His activities included extortion, kidnapping, and money laundering through a network in Mazatlan, Mexico. Sanctioned in June 2025, under his partial leadership, the cartel adopted increasingly sophisticated methods for drug transportation, using cargo aircraft, submarines, and container ships. As outlined in a 2023 Justice Department indictment, everything came to a head on January 5, 2023, when Mexican Special Forces launched Operation Mongoose Aztec. This time, there would be no escape. The operation, involving nearly 200 Special Forces personnel and led by Defense Minister Luis Crescencio Sandoval, was planned with military precision and carried out with overwhelming force. The arrest operation unfolded in the Jesus Maria district of Culiacan, where intelligence suggested Ovidio was hiding. According to reports, an army patrol encountered a convoy of 6 armored trucks, and the occupants refused to cooperate, opening fire on security forces. What followed was a pitched battle that claimed multiple lives, and once again revealed the violent extremes the cartel would reach to protect its leadership.
During his 2 arrests, we saw 30 people killed during his last arrest. They were using 50 caliber machine guns to fire at military craft in Mexico. So you can see this individual stop at nothing and prompted the large security presence at the federal building.
The battle to arrest Guzman led to 29 total deaths, including 7 soldiers, 19 alleged cartel fighters, and 1 army colonel, with cartel gunmen using 50 caliber machine guns to fire at military aircraft. The scale of the violence was unprecedented, even by cartel standards, leaving Jesus Maria resembling a war zone, a carpet of shell casings, shattered glass, charred vehicles, and blood-stained uniforms. Despite the cartel's fierce resistance, this time the operation succeeded. Ovidio was captured and immediately flown by helicopter to Mexico City, where he was placed in the Altiplano maximum security prison. The operation involved over 3,000 troops, including paratroopers and special forces, with an additional 1,000 deployed to contain the aftermath, underscoring the massive military effort required to capture a single man. The successful arrest marked the end of Ovidio's reign of freedom and the beginning of a legal journey that would ultimately deliver him to the United States, where he would face the full weight of American justice. From extradition to cooperation, the unraveling of a cartel prince, the capture of Ovidio Guzman Lopez in January 2023 was only the beginning of a legal odyssey that would expose the inner workings of one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations. What followed his arrest was a carefully orchestrated process that turned the cartel prince from a defiant drug lord into a cooperating witness against his own empire. This transformation became one of the most significant developments in the ongoing war against international drug trafficking, with implications reaching far beyond the fate of one man. Following his dramatic arrest in Culiacan, Ovidio found himself confined in Mexico's most secure facility, the Altiplano Federal Social Readaptation Center, infamous for housing the country's most dangerous criminals. Altiplano was the same prison where his father, El Chapo, had once been held before his own extradition to the United States.
Ovidio Guzman Lopez is being housed in more humane conditions than his father, El Chapo, according to the attorney who represents both. Lawyer Jeffrey Lichtman says El Chapo's confinement is the worst he's ever seen. And oddly, if son Ovidio is convicted in Chicago, he faces 10 years to life behind bars, likely in the Colorado Supermax prison, right where his father, El Chapo, is a lifetime.
For Ovidio, the prison walls represented not just physical confinement, but the closing of a chapter in his life as a free man operating at the highest levels of international drug trafficking. The irony was not lost on him. He was walking in his father's footsteps in ways he had never intended. The cartel's response to Ovidio's imprisonment was telling in its restraint. Unlike the explosive violence that had secured his freedom in 2019, this time, there were no massive mobilizations, no citywide battles, and no ultimatums to the government. This shift in strategy suggested several possibilities. Either the cartel lacked the strength to mount another rescue operation, or more ominously, they had calculated that Ovidio was no longer worth the risk. For a man once valued by the cartel to the point of open war, this silence must have been deafening. That silence, however, was short-lived. On September 15th, 2023, just 8 months after his capture, Ovidio was extradited to the United States, marking a major victory for U.S. law enforcement agencies that had pursued him for years. The speed of the extradition was notable, given the complex legal processes that usually govern international transfers. Upon his arrival, Ovidio was placed in federal custody and arraigned in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois in Chicago. On September 18th, 2023, before Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman, he initially pleaded not guilty to a 9-count superseding indictment. The charges were devastating, including 5 counts tied to a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, money laundering, and firearms offenses. The indictment outlined a global operation that generated hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal profits. It also revealed the level of international law enforcement cooperation that had made his capture possible. The charges allege that from 2008 to 2021, he conspired to distribute cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana from Mexico into the U.S., with Chicago serving as a key hub. Beyond trafficking, the indictment detailed the violence and corruption that marked the cartel under Los Chapitos. Chicago was chosen strategically, long a central distribution hub for the Sinaloa cartel, and the site of many high-profile prosecutions. The courthouse held decades of precedent and institutional knowledge vital for such a complex case. The evidence against Ovidio was overwhelming, built on years of intelligence, intercepted communications, financial records, and witness testimony. U.S. law enforcement had tracked his rise for over a decade, documenting every move within Los Chapitos. During his early months in custody, Ovidio was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Chicago, a facility known for housing high-profile detainees. There, he experienced the stark reality of U.S. federal imprisonment, a far cry from the luxury and power he once knew. Every aspect of his life, eating, sleeping, communication, even what he could read or watch, was controlled by others. For a man who once wielded life and death power over thousands, the loss of autonomy was perhaps the greatest punishment. Given his stature, Ovidio was likely held in protective custody, isolated from other inmates to prevent intimidation or rescue attempts. During this period, federal prosecutors and defense attorneys began negotiations that would reshape his future. The U.S. government held all the leverage. The evidence was overwhelming. The charges carried life sentences, and his family's empire was under historic assault from law enforcement on both sides of the border. Meanwhile, the Sinaloa cartel itself faced internal upheaval. Since the July 2024 arrests of Ismael El Mayo Zambada and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, a brutal civil war between the Los Chapitos and El Mayo factions had left more than 1,000 dead and another 1,000 missing in Sinaloa.
And Joaquin Guzman Lopez is being spared from the death penalty, a punishment federal authorities initially said was a possibility. Our investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy joining us now with what led to what appears to be a break for El Chapo's.
This internal strife weakened the cartel's ability to support Ovidio and created additional pressure for him to consider cooperating with U.S. authorities. The turning point came in early 2025, when reports surfaced that Ovidio was engaged in serious plea negotiations with federal prosecutors. These negotiations were complex and multifaceted, involving not only his own legal situation, but also the broader implications for ongoing investigations into the Sinaloa cartel's operations.
You consistently told us that your client would not make a deal with the government. What changed at this point?
Things evolved. I mean, when somebody asks me at the beginning of a case what your client's planning on doing, I don't know what's going to...
By January 2025, reports indicated that 17 of his relatives, including his mother, Griselda Lopez Perez, had entered the United States, possibly as part of negotiations related to his case. This development suggested that any potential cooperation agreement would extend beyond Ovidio himself, providing protection for his family members who might face retaliation from rival cartel factions, or even former allies within the Sinaloa organization. The negotiations intensified throughout the spring of 2025, with both sides working toward an agreement that would serve their interests. For the U.S. government, Ovidio represented a trove of intelligence about the Sinaloa cartel's operations, leadership structure, financial networks, and corruption of Mexican officials. For Ovidio, cooperation offered the possibility of a reduced sentence and protection for his family. During this period, concerns grew over Ovidio's physical and mental health. Reports from Infobay, cited by Latin Times on July 15, 2025, confirmed he was undergoing psychiatric treatment for clinical depression. The stress of facing potential life imprisonment, combined with the isolation of protective custody, and the knowledge that cooperation might endanger his remaining family, had taken a severe toll on his psychological well-being. Earlier in 2023, his lawyers reported severe gastritis requiring 2 stomach surgeries and ongoing anxiety, showing that his health struggles were both physical and mental. These conditions highlighted the stark transformation from a cartel leader who once unleashed urban warfare to secure his freedom, to a man whose body and mind were breaking under pressure. The final breakthrough in negotiations came in July 2025, when all parties reached an agreement that would fundamentally alter Ovidio's life and potentially give U.S. law enforcement unprecedented insight into the Sinaloa cartel's inner workings. The stage was set for a dramatic court appearance that would mark one of the most significant moments in the war against international drug trafficking. As news of the impending plea deal spread through law enforcement circles, speculation mounted about what information Ovidio might provide and what impact his cooperation could have on the criminal empire that had defined his life for over a decade. The anticipation was intense. This was not just another drug case, but a potential window into the highest levels of one of the world's most sophisticated criminal enterprises. The guilty plea and the uncertain future of Los Chapitos.
Ovidio has a plea deal brokered by attorney Lichtman and is scheduled to plead guilty on July 9th.
On July 11th, 2025, the corridors of the Dirksen Federal Building in Chicago witnessed a moment that would reverberate throughout the international drug trafficking world for generations. In a packed courtroom filled with federal agents, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and journalists occupying every seat, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, once the powerful leader of the Los Chapitos faction, stood before Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman and uttered 2 words that would forever change his destiny and potentially alter the course of the war on drugs. Guilty. Your Honor, the weight of this moment extended far beyond one man's admission of guilt. It marked the formal acknowledgement by cartel royalty that the empire built by his father was crumbling, that the code of silence protecting criminal organizations for generations was breaking down, and that even the most powerful dynasties were not immune to the reach of justice. The ripple effects of this admission stretched from law enforcement boardrooms to cartel safe houses, from Mexico City's corridors of power to American street corners where fentanyl was claiming lives daily. In court, Guzman Lopez appeared in an orange jumpsuit, speaking softly through an interpreter. The contrast was stark and symbolic. The man who once commanded fear now stood diminished, his voice barely audible as he admitted to fueling one of America's worst public health crises. The orange uniform stripped away the last vestiges of his former power. Gone was the swagger, the arrogance, the air of untouchability. In his place stood a broken figure, resigned to survival through cooperation with the very system he had once fought. The courtroom was filled with representatives from multiple agencies, FBI, DEA, prosecutors, and even Mexican officials, all gathered to witness history. The charges to which Ovidio pleaded guilty were 4 counts, 2 drug conspiracies, and 2 for knowingly engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. Though narrow, the admissions revealed his role in overseeing a global empire poisoning communities and orchestrating violence. The deal was strategic, balancing punishment with securing his cooperation against the cartel. His plea agreement included admissions of trafficking cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, and fentanyl. The last particularly damning as fentanyl drives America's overdose epidemic. He admitted to murders in Mexico and Arizona, kidnappings and bribery, exposing the brutality of cartel life. Financially, he agreed to an $80 million forfeiture, crippling cartel assets. But the most consequential element was his cooperation, providing intelligence on cartel operations and potentially testifying against figures like Ismael El Mayo Zambada and Rafael Caro Quintero. This shattered the cartel code of silence and signaled a new phase in the war between cartels and the state. His guilty plea made him the first of El Chapo's sons to admit guilt in a U.S. court, setting a precedent that could push others toward cooperation. As of July 24, 2025, Ovidio's location remains secret, moved under extraordinary security measures. Reports confirm he was relocated after his plea, his whereabouts hidden even from foreign officials, standard for high-value cooperating witnesses. This secrecy prevents assassination or rescue attempts, keeps cartel leaders uncertain, and pressures others to surrender. appearance set for January 2026. In that time, he will provide detailed accounts of leadership, finances, corruption, and cartel operations. The impact on his family is immense. His brother Joaquin faces trial after his 2024 arrest, while Ivan Archivaldo and Jesus Alfredo remain fugitives with $10 million bounties. Ovidio's cooperation may lead to their capture. Diplomatically, tensions rise as Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum criticizes U.S. handling of the case, exposing fragile ties between nations. For Ovidio, the future is uncertain, though cooperation may reduce his sentence. Decades in prison await, haunted by threats of retaliation. His transformation from cartel prince to federal informant marks more than personal downfall. It signals a shift in the balance of power between organized crime and law. Whether this is true justice or another turn in the endless cycle of crime and punishment remains unclear. One truth is certain: the name Guzman will never again carry the same weight in the criminal underworld. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other stories on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next.